Okay, so let's look at these. So let's look at number one. It says kite flying has a long history in Japan. According to the legend, the first kites were flying or flown or were flown or had flew nearly 1400 years ago, right? So here, first of all, the first thing we have to do is figure out verb agreement, right? So we know that the subject here is what? The subject here is kites. So right, that is plural. So far, just based on that, none of these we don't really have an issue with, right? But we do know that what? Um, if you say the first kites, right, we have to think about, who was flying the kites, right? And here the kites were definitely, the kites don't fly by themselves, right? Kites are flown by somebody, right? So therefore we would have to have were, right? What's wrong with B is that what we don't have a conjugated verb, right? Meaning that we have like a verb flown, but we don't really have, there has to be a is or a were or are or a be verb in front of it, right? And we don't have that. So here the answer would be C. Let's look at question number two. So question number two, right off the bat, remember we see this word and we know that this is a signal word, right? So whenever we see since, what do we think of? We think of present perfect, right? So present perfect is what? When an action starts in or begins in the past and then it continues on to the present, right? And we said that when it comes to present perfect, there are only two ways to show present perfect is to have what? Has for singular and have for plural, right? So automatically we can eliminate this had, right? Because had is past perfect. Would have, we can eliminate. Will, future tense, we can eliminate. So the only one left is D, right? So by sort of using these quick tips, we can quickly eliminate some of the answers that absolutely could not be the correct answer.
Wait, why is B wrong?
Um, because when you say since that time, we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about, since meaning what? At some point in the past up to the present, right? But then
Mm-hmm.
if you say would have is sort of a conditional. And we're going to talk about would today as well. But would have is like you're saying, if something had happened, it would have, right? So you're saying after on some condition, something might have happened. But if you're saying since, you're saying, definitely it did happen and it is continuing to happen.
Oh, okay. Okay.
hmm Good question, though. Let's look at number three. So number three here, we see, what is the subject? It is, so this is what we call a compound subject, right? And a compound subject is when, let me just write this down. A compound subject is when you have two subjects, right? And so you're saying like A and B. And so A and B become compound subjects. So let's say A is a singular subject and B is a singular subject. Even though they are individually singular subjects together as a compound subject, they become plural, right? Because if you say like Mary and Jane, right, then Mary and Jane may be individuals and they may be singular, but together they become plural, right? So here we have colorful narrative illustrations, which is plural to begin with anyway, and legendary heroes, right? So that becomes a compound subject. So that becomes plural automatically. So if it becomes plural, remember we said that singular subjects end with verbs plus S, right? So we can eliminate decorate. So A can't be the answer. So it's got to be one of these. But this is not, there's no indication here that this is, an action starting in the past. Um, so therefore, we would put in B as the answer, right? Decorate. If we would see, so some students might ask, but I feel like it could be D as well. Like it sounds like it could be D. So then what we would have to do is you would have to look at the going tense here, right? And it says, kites are made of bamboo, right? And decorate their surfaces. This is sort of a fact, right? We're not talking about a historical fact. We're just talking about the kites themselves. So you would have to decide, you would have to know whether this is present tense or past tense. If we were talking about a very specific historical incident, obviously it would either be present perfect or past tense, right? But when we're just simply describing the kites themselves, we would just take the present tense. For this reason, there is no single design that blank, right? So once again, Q, remember how we said that subjects or nouns that have one or single, like these are sort of dead giveaways. This becomes singular, right? If there's single, right? That I don't know if there's a clearer way to indicate singular, right? So This is singular, so therefore are cannot be the answer. Had been is past perfect, right? No, so our answer would be C, right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about future tense. There isn't that much to talk about future tense, but so this is sort of picking up from where we left off yesterday. Future tense is most likely we will indicate with a will, right? Very easy, right? We would say I will, blah, 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 blah. You know, she will, they will. That's pretty simple, right? So let's think about would. So would is a bit tricky. Would, like we talked about earlier, just now actually, there are many uses of would. So there's one conditional, right? If I would say, for example, if I won the lottery, I would not take the SAT, probably, right? So this would, right, is a conditional would, meaning that what? This would depends on this fact, right? So if I won the lottery, I would not take the SAT. So we call it conditional because there's this if element to it, right? Two, we also use it to talk about the future from the present, from the past, right? So we can say something like, so I can say, there was an artist who was really obscure and nobody knew about her. She was not recognized, but later she would become famous, right? So when I say later she would become famous, what am I talking about? I'm talking about the future from the past, right? Like I can be talking about someone's past and then I said later she would become famous, right? But obviously because I'm in the present and because I know that that happened, looking back, I'm able to say that, right? And the third thing that really I think confuses students and students often get it wrong is we become really conditioned to assuming that would is future tense, right? And so whenever there is a passage about past tense, we automatically just eliminate would. Would is like one of the first to go because we just assume that would is always future tense. But that's actually not true. And I'm going to put this in blue because it's an exception. Would can also be used to represent past tense, but let me give you an example. When I was young, I would go to the beach every summer. So if you look at this sentence, right, we have a would, but obviously this is not a future tense, right? So in this case, what would becomes is would can also be past tense, except it is a recurring past action. So that means that what? If you look at this sentence, when I was young, I would go to the beach every summer. What can we see? We can see that this is not an action that happens just once, right? It's something that recurs. It happens again and again. So would can also be used to talk about past actions. So if I go back to the earlier screen, right, would can be used to talk about a conditional future. Would can be used to talk about the future, moving from, it's sort of like foresight from the past. And then third, it can be used as recurring past tense, right? So would has like these very different functions. So, when we talk about future tense, will is never really an issue for students because that's, very obvious and easy to identify. And there are really no sort of tricks you can do with that. But when it comes to would, I always say try to be careful, right?